is us. So, Father, thank you. I just release the spirit of freedom over this place, God, that the Spirit of the Lord is remembering itself inside of every person's heart, every person's mind, that any baggage that tried to sneak in here with any person, any bondage that tried to keep you entrapped, that the chains are falling off of your mind, that every thought that tried to raise itself up by the nature and the reality of God inside of man would be broken right now in this very instance, that there's a city beginning to reap what some here have never sown into, but are beginning to reap, and they're going to sow a new story because it's a new time and it's a new day, and people went before us in order for us to be here, changing the way things seem to look. Things look differently now because they're supposed to look differently now. They're not sounding the same. They're not looking the same. They don't feel the same. And if you look around for security, you can easily get lost in what you thought you wanted before. But it's a new day, and there's a new way, and there's words that are coming back to life with new meanings because your people are awakening, Father. And I thank you, God, that we allow ourselves to be put in the position to be fathered by your heart, your love, that we see the revelation of righteousness. We see the marriage of you inside of us, and we take every thought captive, and we put our heart and we mix it in together, and we see your heart manifested on the planet. We say, kingdom come from the inside out. We're not asking for an outside source. Maybe once we truly understand the inner God, we'll start to actually see the God outside of us, because he only has access by what we're willing to do with him, because he says, you're my bride. I won't do it without getting you pregnant. So open up your eye to see the love that's for you. Don't worry about how it's going to happen. Just be willing to believe it's going to happen. The dreams that are in your heart, hey, it's the green light. It's time to start. All I need you to do is believe. I don't need you to even try to grab it or receive, because it's just accepted by beloved identity. So I say, just rest in that moment and let yourself be free. Every moment that I came was every moment that I had to leave, because inside the law, I couldn't even get you in that place. I had to close the garden and put a sword in front of it because you would burn your own face. I was trying to show you glory, but you tried to write your own story. It's okay. I wanted it that way because the experience of God and man had to happen either way. So it's all right to take the hard route, but there's a better way, and I'm here to show you that on this very day. See, you don't have to create from hate or shame or condemnation or guilt. You don't have to get lost in deception of who you thought somebody needed you to be, or who you thought you needed to be for somebody, because I came to be that for everybody. So now you get to share with them who I am, and your frequency enters the room, and now it's a multiplication, and the God inside of every person awakens to that alone. So every time you share a life, a word of love, you begin to show them their own throne, because it's happening in us, not just I. So there is not one real leader. I am denied that, but it worked for a while, so thank you. So I just give gratitude to you in this room. I thank you, God. I thank you, Spirit. I thank you that I don't have to strive or work or do it so hard anymore, and I don't have to resist what I was going through before, that even tonight we're going to hear a message that shatters deception from yesterday. Even the things that we've operated in resistance, they are going to be paraded around like a spectacle, because you said all principalities and powers lost their throne, and you make a spectacle of them, while you walked around with that cross on your back with a smile on your face, knowing that when you rose again, we would take your place. That's the new way. Manifested, can't be rejected. You've already been accepted. Just believe. If you can get your body to catch on to what your heart is saying, you will be free. It's not a question. You will be free. So right now, just invite this sweet, 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 sweet feeling to be the actual reality of you. And we put our thoughts on you right now, and we just keep letting you do you, and we let go, and we just flow. We flow right here. Love you.
As we started worshiping the night, I feel like it's a bunch of people in the room, and you've been in a spot that you just kind of feel stuck at one point. You're also a little bit excited, but you kind of feel like you don't know which way you're supposed to go. And I want to encourage you. What I saw, I just saw God embracing you right where you were. And as he embraced you, he melted into you. All right? And then the next thing that I heard was, you're not going to miss it. You're not going to miss it. It looks different, but allow your will, allow your desire the place that it deserves in your life. There's probably some things that you've been suppressing, that you've been pushing down. And I just hear God saying, allow those things room to express themselves. And that'll pull you in the right direction. And I saw this arrow flying through the air. It's funny, the kids were building bow and arrows back there today. I saw this arrow flying through the air, and I saw the wind just pushing it, steering it, right on course, right on target. You're not going to miss. So I want to encourage you, pursue those things in your life. Pursue them because they are the Father's leading and guiding. They are his embrace. They are his peace. And as you start to go, just run after.
And I'm talking about taking a picture and having you do movement or anything like that. All that is an attempt to help you move your energy, your essence into the Word. So one thing that we would teach, and the ones that have been around us for a while would know, if I was giving somebody a word, Darren, or he'd give a word about, man, you need a vacation. God says, da-da-da-da-da-da. Do you guys remember some of those services? And then we knew right then that was a door, that these guys needed a vacation. And so one person would begin to go up and throw money, and then before you knew it, they'd have all the money they need for a vacation. But it wasn't just generosity. It's more than that. It's moving into the Word. And it's not just, I'm not talking about, we're just here to practice in this space. But when you get a word from God in here, you hear the voice. If there's no movement to it, it just becomes something that doesn't manifest. And so there's a movement to it. I mean, the one thing that Darren learned to do, or maybe it was his Pentecostal roots, hi Brittany, was to pray it through. You guys ever heard that term? That you start something until you finish it. I'll give you a word picture that hopefully you'll never forget. Can you imagine if you did everything, you're married but you did everything but actually the consummation? But that's how church is. And it's like, I told you, it feels like a scratch and stiff sticker sometimes, like you're barely getting there. It's almost like you got to get everybody amped up to let's move, and you don't know where we're going, and you're like, so the whole thing is the breakthrough or whatever you need, the clarity of mind, the healing, it is within you. And so when we're showing pictures or we're saying move into it, it's understanding that there's movement, and before you know it, you're in it. You're in what was uttered. The words are just words. There's no life in it without the manifestation. Veronica was saying, I think it was Veronica, who was saying whenever JM was playing the guitar and they knew that things were being reset in their mind? Karuna, that's right. So she didn't even have to have an explanation, and listen, if you can't sense anything, come get around. I'm not being just funny about Brad and Brittany. If you get around Brad, you're going to get joy. It's because it's already in you. It's going to begin to awaken it in you, right? So you get around, you go. We would always just come to the front or get around people that are moving. There's movement. There's movement. Everyone say there's movement. So what Karuna said is JM started playing, and she knew that you prophesy on an instrument. Your mind does not have to understand. In fact, if your mind does understand, it's probably not God. It's not Shemaiah. It's not heaven, right? And so she began just to move into and open her heart. And I mean, a huge thing began to take place in her heart. So that's what that's about. And so what I want you to do, if you want to be on this track, is once you hear something, then you say, it's not about the old works thing. I understand that a lot of us are coming out of religion. So it's like a woman that was controlled by a man, and then she gets free from that, and then she's like crazy in the streets, and she broke up, their divorce is over, their marriage is over. That's not usually the woman that you want to invite to your bachelorette party right away, because she thinks all men are, and she's just angry and bitter, and marriage sucks and all of that. But hopefully if she gets some time, she'll kind of swing back in some healing. because the judgment came from the bondage. So what has happened in church is we were under the law. We were under bondage, even in giving. You guys, if you didn't see that little video I sent out. And so then when we got free from it, we're like, hey, see you later, sucker, which is okay, right? But then you come back into a place of healing and direction, and where there's movement. Does that make sense? So even as we're talking about giving, and I mean, y'all, if you know me, I just rather walk away from it altogether, because the system has always just turned my stomach, because it's so soulish. We have to, the church pumps people up, or they show favor to people that have money, and they're really excited. They, you know what I mean? Like and it's not even to line their pockets. They're not all wanting jet airplanes and, hookers or whatever they want. I don't know. I just threw that one in to see if you're listening. But it's because people are soulish. So you have to meet them where they are. But God's maturing us. And if you understand that what you do throughout the week that brings in money, there's an energy in it. And so hands down, and this is one thing I want to just help the young generation, because they're like getting Netflix flicks for free, and their music's free, and all of this. And, if somebody starts discipling me, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's a message here or there, hands down, we start sowing into it. We position our heart to connect the essence of our week, of our labor, into what's happening. It's even beyond honor. It's this energy thing. So there's the text. If you still give by cash or check, raise your hand. These guys, I know that there's crickets when you say that, because a lot of people don't do that. You want to say something? Oh, get up here, girl. Oh, were you going to say anything? Okay. All right. Anybody else give cash or check? Yes, we do. But you need to say it with an E-N, because Josie says envelopes for envelopes. Okay, I'm just kidding.
Real fast, just Sheila did her little video last week, and when Chris and I were in our 20s, we were very much under the law, but we gave. Every time they said give, we gave, even though we were paying our bills out of credit cards and everything else, because whatever the church wanted, we were going to give it. Chris would always stand up and give money when we had nothing in the bank, and I'm like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And the next day, the money was there. And then we went through this game of, I would pay my tithes, I'd add up all of our bills, didn't have enough money, then I would pay our tithes one at a time. Pay my tithe and then pay my bills one at a time, and every single thing would get met. This is our home. This is our mortgage. This is our rent in this home. This is the head of our home. The man that loved this woman more than anything else still loves this woman, and so should this body. And in support of that, there's bills to be paid. And as hard as it is for her to get up and say the things that she said, we're all here because we support her vision. And we need to support this house. It's important. We can't be together here if we don't do it. Love you.
All right, thank you. Mm-hmm. Oh, and I heard a rumor, I'll just say it because Teresa was getting all riled up, because this is what I want you to understand. It hurts me for people. I'm serious. I mean that. I'm not after anything. I'm going to be taking care of you guys. If you know how I am with money, I do not care. Like, my brother used to make fun of me, like, where's that $50? And I'd find it on the bottom of my shoe when I'm walking through Walmart. I'm like, oh, God always took care of me, right? You guys can go sit down, that's fine. But I heard a rumor that people thought I got a huge settlement because of asbestos, because of dealing with that. None of that is true. And if somebody quits giving because of that, it's because you're you're living soulishly with your finances. And I'm concerned about you if you'll ever get in the flow, because it's nothing to do with who has more, doesn't have more. If you want to live where the squeaky wheel gets the oil, you're always going to have a squeaky wheel. And I've been there, not just with finances. I've been there with my kids. I've been there with people. The one that is the most offended gets most your attention and gifts on the holidays. That's soulish living. That's nothing to do with Shemaiah. That's nothing to do with the Spirit of God that's in you. So even if I was a bazillionaire, right, you have to hear from heaven if you want to be in the flow, not just in here, everywhere you go. And you're the only one that can do it on Monday through Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So I suggest that you put some money aside in your wallet, and Nathan's dad has lived like this. Is it your dad, Nathan, that lives with like a 20, always just to hear, just to learn to get in the flow? Who do I give this to? So when you're out and about, was it your dad that always has like $20? Huh? Rick. Okay. Oh yeah, Rick. And your dad needs to start doing that. I'm just kidding. He moved up to 100. I think he started. Always would put an extra $100 or whatever. Start doing that. I'm not talking about church here. I'm talking about you living in a different flow. There's no way out outside of that flow. You either are living by the systems of man or you're living by the kingdom of heaven. Okay? So, how many of you guys this week, I don't care if it's $5, it could be up to $100, it could be $1,500, you'll put it aside in your wallet. Who will do that this week? To purposefully hear and listen. And you're going to be like, whoo, when you hear the story, or if you don't, once you release it. You're going to feel energy, your life energy be released. Okay? And then you put it back in there and wait to let it happen again. Get in the flow. Y'all ready? Get on up here. If you guys weren't here, there's a book called No Bad Parts. We started singing about it. That's how we sell books. Get that book, No Bad Parts. That's what these guys have been talking out of. If you didn't listen to last Saturday night, you can go to YouTube at I Am God's House or IamGod'sHouse.com on the website. Listen to last Saturday night, and then these guys have been tearing it up. It's awesome.
Sorry. I didn't know this was on already. I was talking to Alex. I said Luke, I meant Mark, I think. I know I'm not talking to none of you here at this moment. But where are the sons and daughters? The ones that truly, let me tell you how you know you're a son and daughter. I mean, there's probably lots of ways. But you take responsibility in the house, even though it's a reality. And she hates the system. You know why she hates the system? Same reason I hated the system. Because I worked for you guys. And I depended upon people giving in order for me to pay my bills. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because I made that my life to give to others. And when people don't give, but they come and they receive, but yet you spend waking hours not just praying for people, spending time counseling people, do you know how long it takes? Darren, somebody once asked me and Darren one time, how long does it take you to prepare a message? We said 30 years, because that's our life. You understand what I'm saying? It's like you're not just getting something, somebody who just putting something together in 5 minutes before on their way to church. This is their life. So it makes me a little bit upset, to be perfectly honest. I can feel it. Y'all can feel it on me. It's in my gut right now. It's the last thing I want to do is be confronted. But if I ever do confront, you've done messed up, because I will cross a line that'll probably hurt your feelings, and I'll feel bad about it later and torment myself over it. Okay. But I know I'm not talking to anybody in here. So it's the people on the internet maybe who's a part of the house, that they need to wake up a little bit in this. If you're a part of the house, take responsibility. I'm saying that as your brother. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. I belong with you guys. So if I'm saying that as a brother. If you're a part of the house, be responsible, okay? Don't just receive. You talk about selfish. Come on. Now, I don't care about the flow of the universe. Freaking bills got to be paid, okay? Let me be real. The bills got to be paid. I know I'm pissing somebody off, but I'm sorry. I told you I've done upset over it now. So bills have to be paid, all right? That's the practical side of all this. It's unfortunate it's that way. It's unfortunate that she's stuck in that system. One day she will be released from that. And you know what's going to change? Not a dang thing. She'll still serve you. You understand what I'm saying? So just be responsible. Not y'all. Be responsible, you people on the internet. Anyways. I know I just screwed up the whole service, didn't I? Y'all never see me mad. It's because I don't get there. Hey, turn in your Bibles. We're going to continue what we talked about, if I can gain myself. Maybe I should just turn this over to Alex now because... See, I'm usually the funny guy. Come on, lighten up. I'm okay. I'm the same guy. Turn your Bibles to, we're going to look at Mark. We're going to look at Mark chapter 5. Alex and I have been talking about this understanding of how this human construct of people having various parts. So we broke all that down today, and I really don't have time to go over all that. But those of you who were not here, if you can get a hold of that video, that's going to make what I'm about to say that's going to make a lot of sense to you if you know that context. So we talked about how the self, capital S self, is the Christ. It derives from the Christ within. It is the true self. Yeah. And so part of the role of the true self, or the self-energy, is to bring healing to the components, the parts that have been fragmented and taken on dysfunctional roles, who have extreme roles, have extreme emotions. Because in our life, if we're not careful, those parts tend to blend with us and then start to become dysfunctional in our lives. And we start to repeat patterns because of these emotional and behavioral issues, and bringing wholeness to that. That's about as best as I can catch y'all up.
That's pretty good.
Amen. Sorry, guys, you should have been here. I'm kidding. So now I'm gonna read a story here. Yeah, it just wasn't for you. You wasn't special enough. I'm kidding. I don't know if I'm going to be able to preach or not. So I want you to think about this story, and I'm going to ask you to interpret along with me a little differently than how we would normally interpret this. I'm not trying to make up new scripture. I'm not trying to make up new theology. I'm not trying to make up new revelation. I just want us to think about this story in light of your inside world. If you guys remember last time I spoke, I talked about the garden and how instead of interpreting, and we do interpret it on a literal level, but interpret it on a metaphorical level, where we're looking at each one of those components as a construct within the human. So, for example, you have the garden within Eden. Is that right? Am I saying that right? There's a garden within Eden. And so this sort of symbolizes that within us, within man, there is a place and space in which we can meet God. There is a place within. In fact, religion has us to look externally, but the true place of meeting God is not external somewhere in the sky. We worship the sky god, or Zeus, who we're begging him, he's always a him, begging him to somehow act upon our situations because we're in distress and we're in trouble, but he's distant and far away. That is a religious concept that Jesus worked very hard to try to shift that, because he was constantly helping people understand there's a dynamic within humanity where God exists. Yeah. Y'all on the same page with me there? Yeah. So I was applying the garden, or applying the story of the garden to our inside world. So we had man and woman. So that, honestly, that represents the two halves of the brain. The right hemisphere being the feminine part of the brain, or the feminine energy, and the left part of the brain being the rational, analytical, fact-oriented part of the brain, which would represent the masculine energy. And we talked about those energies and how everybody has within them masculine and feminine energies. And that's when I told on myself, and I still have trouble with telling y'all that much. I'm hurting. I'm kidding. So I won't go into all that. And then the snake. And the reason, one of the reasons I think it really appeals to me to interpret that story metaphorically is because I don't know too many talking snakes. To me, it's just like signaling that this is, something we need to take a look at that there's more going on here than just literal. Because when it's metaphorical, it has more than one truth, right? So when you apply it metaphorically, it's more than true literally. So if you do it literally, there can only be one true statement in what is being said. There can only be one truth, but metaphorically, there can be multiple truths. Does that make sense? And so then the snake or the serpent represents maybe an aspect of our neurological makeup that we would call the reptilian brain. The reptilian brain being like the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain, fight or flight, those kinds of things. So I'm bringing all that up to say I want to apply that same sort of interpretive license to the story I'm about to read in the context of what we talked about today when we talked about bringing wholeness to the parts out of the self-energy. Make sense? Whew, man, I went down a long road to get to there, didn't I? So let's look at chapter 5, verse 1, and hopefully I can make sense of this. So verse 1 says this: When they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes, and when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him, so it's talking about the him being Jesus, out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. In all ways, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out, cutting himself with stones. When he saw Jesus come from afar, he ran and worshipped him, and he cried out with a loud voice and said, What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you, by God, that you do not torment me. For he said to him, come out of the man, unclean spirit. Then he asked him, what is your name? And he answered, saying, my name is Legion, for we are many. Also he begged him earnestly that he would not send him out of the country. Now a large herd of swine was feeding near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, saying, send us to the swine that we may enter them. And at once Jesus gave them permission. Then the unclean spirit went out and entered the swine, and there were about 2,000. And the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea, drowned into the sea. So those who fed the swine fled, and they told it in the city and in the country. And they went out to see what had happened. Then they came to Jesus and saw the one who had been demon-possessed and had the legion sitting and clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. I'm going to stop there. So, great reading. Read that to your children before they go to bed at night. It's encouraging. So the man with demons. Okay, so I want you to think about this. Okay. How I'm interpreting this is I see Jesus playing the role to our parts, the aspects of ourself that are unwhole, as Jesus, as ourself does to us. As Jesus went about healing, bringing reconciliation, bringing wholeness, bringing those who were the outcasts, those who didn't feel they belonged, the leopard, the prostitutes. Think of the woman caught in adultery who was thrown in front of him. Jesus brought wholeness to her. Jesus brought liberation to her. In the same kind of way, I'm interpreting this as Jesus functioning as the self within us, the capital S self within us that has the ability to bring wholeness to the parts that we experience that are trapped in these extreme roles, in these extreme emotions, fear, shame, guilt, all the things that we experience, right? So this is kind of how I'm asking you to think about this. So think about in your own life when you are in your true self, when you're in that position of your true self, you're actually going to the aspects of you like we talked about today, and you are liberating them so that they are free to be in their right mind. Does that make sense? So I want us to just go through this story and break it down a little bit. Now, Nathan talked about it today when he talked about tombs, right? You know, that there's a light in the tomb. And he applied it to healing in the inner man. And so when I read this story, and he was right in that, in like the word tomb literally means a place of remembrance or memorial. It's literally having memories of death. So here we have this guy who day and night he's breaking chains. He can't be controlled. It says that night and day he's in the mountains and he's in the tombs crying out, tormented. So I want you to think about this. He's in the mountains hitting high places, manic places we talked about today. He's in the high places where he's hitting these extremes, and then he goes right down to the tombs where he is stuck in depression. So he's living between these two extremes like our parts do. And he's stuck in these, going back and forth. Stuck in the tombs, the places that we remember our pain. The place where we remember where we were wounded. The place where we are stuck in time. Like we talked about today. Like we talked about earlier, you know, when I was saying that I was stuck as a 5-year-old boy who was abandoned trying to relate in my marriage. It don't work well. When I went through the abandonment at 5 years old, there was a part of me that got stuck at 5 years old, still expecting to be abandoned. And I was reactive to situations that I wasn't being abandoned in. You understand what I'm saying? Yep. I was living, it was activating that part of abandonment. Nobody was abandoning me, but you couldn't convince me that I wasn't being abandoned. You understand what I'm saying? Like, and these parts can get activated in various relationships. I've told y'all this before. I was a nightmare for Darren and Sheila in the early days. Absolute nightmare. I mean, I felt constant abandonment and rejection every single day. I felt like I didn't measure up. I didn't feel like I was good enough. I thought I was going to get fired every day because I was the associate pastor in the church. Every day I thought I was going to be fired, and I was reactive to it. It's almost as if I was trying to force the issue. It was like, I know this is coming, and I can't handle dwelling in this uncertainty, so I'm going to push the issue so that it happens. And it wasn't until, and you all know the story, but it wasn't until I was able to settle my exile down. The exile, and then the reactive manager who was trying to force issues so that it would prove me right, I guess. Because I couldn't handle just waiting for it to happen. I had to just make it happen. But when Darren helped me settle down, it allowed my managers and my exiles to relax long enough for me to then start to heal. So I say all that to say this is how we tend to function in our lives. We think, everything is just for no reason, but there's always a reason. There's always a cause, if you will. And part of what we're hoping to do with the self-energy is to bring healing to those aspects of our life. Amen. So we have this guy who's experiencing these highs and lows. He's cutting himself, which represents the exiles. Now, we talked about earlier today, it's exiles that cause a person to function in extremes like that, to put out the emotional fire. Oh, excuse me, I said exiles, didn't I? What I meant was firefighters. It's firefighters that jump into place, that try to put out the fire of the emotional pain of the exiles. So the firefighters will do anything. You know, there are some firefighters within people that actually suicide is on the table. Suicide is on the table because it will do anything to get the pain to stop.
That's right. Explain that. There's a lot of people that weren't here with firefighters, exiles, and
Okay. Let's do it. This is what you missed. You should have been here. Okay. Okay, so there are different types of parts that we experience within ourselves. So I started with the idea that first we have a core self. This is the light within you that emanates from you from the day you've taken a breath, the day you were conceived. It is untouched by any abuse. It's untouched by any of the dysfunction. It is absolutely in a state of wholeness. It is where the Christ center is. It is our I amness. It is beingness itself. It is the self-energy. But what happens is through our life, we experience painful situations or difficult circumstances that force aspects of our personality to begin to take on functional roles, functional aspects of us that typically are very dysfunctional. But it takes on these functional parts with good intentions, trying to help us, but it seems to work against the system. And so the way we talked about these parts is it's broken down into various categories. So we have what is called the protectors, which one category of a protector is a manager, which is the one that's trying to control everything, control your entire life. It wants to control people and situations just to keep the exile from even getting activated. So the exiles, I should probably talk about this first. The exiles are the very young parts of us. It's the parts of us that originated probably playful, probably originated very childlike, loving life, being what it is, until things begin to happen that sort of steals that from them, and then they start to take on extreme emotions such as fear, anxiety, depression. They start to take on shame and blame and guilt and abandonment, all these various different types of emotion. It starts to take on that. And these exiles are, when they're triggered, causes us to feel extreme. But then that's when the managers kick in, which is what I was alluding to earlier, where the managers kick in. They try to make it to where they control situations so that the exiles never get triggered to start with. So then you have another category of managers, which is what I was referring to earlier as the firefighters. The firefighters are pretty darn extreme too. But their role is to make sure we don't feel the exiles, and it will do everything in its power to make sure you don't experience the exiles. So the firefighters are the ones that'll take on behaviors that distracts us from the pain. So this is where, we talked about earlier today, this is where drug use comes in. This is where sexual promiscuity comes in. This is where distracting yourself with, drinking 4 glasses of wine at night so that you don't have to feel anything. You stay stuck on Facebook so you never have to face your life. These are the firefighters will jump into action with very bad and dysfunctional behaviors just so I don't have to feel that. Kind of a synopsis of that seem. Are y'all feel kind of caught up on that? Okay. So So in this story, we have this man who's demon-possessed, who has been cutting himself in these highs and lows and these extremes. And it's interesting, it says night and day. This is referring to something. Why didn't it say day and night? This is sort of taking us back somewhere. Night and day, he would cry out. In the beginning, a day was night, and then a whole day, the cycle started at night. This is taking us back somewhere. This is taking us back to origin. This is taking us back to Eden, where we were created with pleasure, where we were in the midst of pleasure, where you're in the presence of God. And then the night and day, so think about this. Nighttime, Sheila might can speak on this. Nighttime and daytime has to do with energies as well. But also nighttime has to do with a state of consciousness where you are asleep. Yeah. Darkness or nighttime is when you've gone unconscious. Now, I'm not telling you you're walking around unconscious and you're just kind of... Unconscious is when you get triggered in anything where you lose the state of awareness that you once had. Yeah. Anybody who has ever had like some true emotional pain, that consumes you to such a place that it takes your vision and your internal thought and your ability to be aware of expansive things. It pulls you into yourself where you are so self-consumed by what you're feeling, you go unconscious. Yeah. Does that make sense what I mean by unconscious? I'm not saying you go out and like you're asleep. You lose perspective. That's good, Jarod. See, that's what I'm hoping I'm explaining, because I remember when I got triggered in my rejection and was triggered into the parts of me that was abandoned, everything just became tunnel vision about me. Yep. Now, if you'd asked me, do you think you're being selfish? No, I'm not selfish. Of course, it was also defensive. I'm not selfish, because our wounded parts are defensive. But I was so consumed with just me that I went unconscious. Listen, unaware. I can't tell you how many times my wife was unconscious in our marriage. I'm kidding. I can't tell you how many times in our marriage we lost consciousness just being reactive. Being reactive is a loss of consciousness, because when you are conscious, you no longer just react. You now can see, so that you are being responsible rather than reactive. So when we get triggered in these parts, we lose a perspective that self gives us. So when we're in our true self, we have a capability of seeing things from a vantage point that brings healing. Whoever brought this water, bless you. Throat's dry. I love it what Jesus said on the cross. He saw what they were doing with killing him. He saw it. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. What is he saying? They're unconscious. They're doing what they're doing, but they're not conscious truly of what they're doing. And so these emotional states causes us to lose our awareness, our consciousness. And so this guy, I'm just going to go through the story. This guy, night and day, is cutting himself, crying out, and he sees Jesus coming, which represents our self, the true self, coming into those situations. And he goes and he throws himself at the feet of Jesus, and he goes, have you come here to torment me? That was his perspective. The perspective, our parts sometimes are terrified of being exposed to the true self. But not only that, when you take the word torment in the Greek has to do with a stone, and it's a testing stone. A testing stone where you take precious metal like gold and you rub it on the stone, and if it's pure gold, it leaves a particular kind of streak, so you're testing it for its purity. This part believed that it was being tested or tormented almost to see if it's good enough. Yep. Do you measure up? Yep. Jesus didn't come there to torment this part. He didn't come here to torment this guy. Our true self is never coming to our parts to torment them, to test them, to see whether they're worthy. But there's aspects of us that does not believe we're worthy of the healing that is available to us. And so this part is like, are you here to test me? Are you here to because am I unworthy, basically? Because when the exiles start to get triggered, that is the primary thing it feels, is unworthy. Unworthy of love, unworthy of acceptance, unworthy of belonging. And so Jesus didn't address that because it wasn't an issue with him. Of course he accepts him. And then he casts the spirits out into the pigs. I have no idea what that means, except it has probably something to do with Israel, because they were unclean, whatever. He said his name was Legion. Okay? And so the pigs ran down the hill, as you know. I don't want to go into all that. And then the people who were farming the pigs went into the town and told them what happened. All the people came there. And this is interesting, guys. It says that they found the man fully clothed and in his right mind. Or the word mind, right mind being a healed mind. A mind that has been brought into wholeness. A mind that had been fragmented and shattered through some form of trauma had been brought into wholeness in his right mind. Fully clothed. What does that mean? The shame was removed. His shame was removed, and now he was brought into a wholeness in his mind. See, this is what the self does within. This story mirrors very well of what we're attempting to do within ourselves. To be that light to the one that is so wounded, that is fragmented. It's interesting, when Jesus started his ministry, he went into the synagogue and he pulled out the scroll of Isaiah and he began to read. He says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me to preach the gospel to the poor and to heal the brokenhearted." The brokenhearted literally means those who have been shattered, fragmented, broken into pieces. Have you ever been scattered before? Have you ever felt scattered? It doesn't feel good. It feels shaky inside. You feel confused. And usually those are parts of us that start to get polarized and work against each other. But in this story, Jesus is showing us that this is the way the self works within us to bring the wholeness to us, to bring the fragmented parts back together. I'm going to hand this over to Alex and let her. Yeah, right now. I should have gave you more warning. I know you guys are tired. I'm not going to keep going.
There's a mic. I'm going to take the gum out of my mouth. For you guys who weren't here this morning, Jarod spoke more on the parts and really broke it down, and we even wrote a little bit on the board. So if you want to go back and watch that, it's very helpful to kind of understand and break it down a little bit more. And then I told a story about going into my own parts. This is based off of a therapy called IFS. And in the book, No Bad Parts, that he had recommended in the beginning, there's several meditations in there that you can actually do to go into to speaking directly to those parts of yourself. And I talked a little bit about this earlier, but a lot of these parts that you're trying to speak to that inner child or that exile, and oftentimes they are so protected by your managers, which can look like multiple things. I talked a little bit about this earlier too. I'm just going to go over it. I had a session a time with Jarod. No problem. Thank you. I had a time with Jarod last Thursday. And I felt really good afterwards. Ramsey was off work, so we were actually hanging out. And I felt really good, and I was kind of on a high, I was like, oh, I'm doing the inner work. I feel really great. And all of a sudden, I'm in the bathroom, and I just get hit with extreme emotion of just like body dysmorphia, which is one of my major firefighters, which is something I actually hadn't dealt with in a while. And so all of a sudden I'm in the mirror, and we're getting ready to go to the gym with the kids, and I do not want to go. I'm looking in the mirror, I'm just feeling disgusted. It's just to the point where my next firefighter comes into play, and then I'm tired, and I crawl into my bed and put the blanket over my head. And this is last week, you guys, so this is a daily practice for me. And Ramsey's like, babe, what's going on? And when he's starting to recognize after 2 years when I shut down and I start to completely disassociate, you can't really pull me out of it until I can pull myself out of it, because I can't communicate with you even if I wanted to. So I'm already in this state of emotionally being shut down. And I'm doing this to show the craziness of these managers and firefighters playing. So I get hit with, the body dysmorphia, then I'm exhausted. Then I get hit with my inner critic. That's like, well, if you feel this way about yourself, then get up and go to the gym. Like, get up and work out. Like, why are you laying in bed? You're being lazy. How do you think you're going to get your goals if you're not doing anything about them? So then I'm having so much inner conflict. I get up and I put my workout clothes on, and then the next one that hits me is extreme anxiety. So we pull up to the gym. I can't get out of the car. And I'm like, can you guys go inside? I need to sit here for a second. And I'm just like... So you forced yourself out of bed? I forced myself out of bed. My extreme critic forced me out of bed because I was lazy and stupid. And this is, the voices in my head. We all have them. I'm just going to be honest about how they speak to me. And so then I'm at the gym, and I'm so anxious. I can't go inside. My entire body's shaking, kind of like right now, and I can't go in. And so I'm aware enough to know, okay, I have the tools on how to deal with this. So I'm going to sit in the car, and I'm just going to, at first I'm trying to force myself, but it's causing me more anxiety and for me to even shut down more, and I'm frozen in the car, and I can't move. And so I get really quiet, take a couple breaths, kind of try to go into a meditative state and say, okay, what's happening here? What's going on? And I always talk very kindly to the ecosystem within myself, because their voices are already so harsh, right? So I come in there with a very soft tone, and I go, okay, guys, I understand all my firefighters are going off right now. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about what's happening. And my anxiety is, she's just shaking. I don't know why I imagine her as an old woman, but I do. And she's like, I can't go in there. It's very humorous in there. That's why I relate to Robin Williams. It's like a whole movie clip or something. I don't know. And so I go, hey, anxiety, listen, I understand that you're panicking, okay? I'm here with you. Your higher self is here with you. Can you give me a little bit of space to talk to whatever you're protecting? Because I don't even know at this point what she is protecting. And she says, okay, she's anxious. Anxious. Alex is pretty chill. And that's really not who she is. That's just the role I've had her in for such a long time. So I have a little space there, and I'm starting to feel a little more spacious within my body, and I feel a little bit more calm. And so then I turn to my critic, and me and her, We butt heads a lot. I'm like, hey, honey, bless your heart. Can you also back off? Sometimes I have to get a little more stern because she's kind of rude. And she doesn't really like to go very far. She likes to stay pretty close so that she can really make sure Alex is always, on point. And then I just kind of saw this little girl, and I didn't have an exact age, but if you asked Jarod, I don't think he would say that I was very vulnerable in that session either. I mean, I was kind of open to a degree, but I was feeling so good about it. And then my firefighters recognized, oh, but you were vulnerable. So then they came into play to shut that down. And I was also already feeling vulnerable because Ramsey was off of work, and so he was at home. And mentally, I was already dealing with, I don't do enough. Even taking care of Joni and Troy, and sometimes as a mom, you don't feel like you're doing enough. You don't feel like there's a lot of worth to what you do because you're like, well, I'm just a mom. I'm just making lunches and playing with the toys. And so having Ramsey there was already making me feel uncomfortable because I was like, he's always providing, and here I am just at home, and he's watching my daily life, and it's pretty chill, making bagels and playing, with the toys and playing dress up with the kids. And so I was starting to feel vulnerable. I was starting to feel very seen and exposed. Exposed was how I was feeling. By Jarod and Ramsey. They don't know that they are causing me to feel this way. And really it's just myself causing it, right? So my firefighters jump into play, and as I talked about earlier, I'm someone who has lived a lot in the firefighter stage, very manic, because I enjoy the adrenaline rush, and I enjoy the really high highs, and even at times the low lows. It almost became an addiction for me. So I didn't live in most of my managers of just the inner critic. Most of the time it was just like, mean to myself, great, I'm amazing. Mean to myself, I'm amazing. Sad, depressed, amazing. And so you can see how in a moment of an hour, you can see multiple parts coming into play. Yeah. And so as I calmed that girl down, I said, listen, your existence is enough, okay? You don't have to do any more than what you're doing right. And I'm just talking to her real calmly, and I'm saying your existence is enough. You're loved. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be open. Inner critic, can you give me enough space to go in there and enjoy my workout? I don't want to be pushed by, the hateful words that I try to push myself with. And so I create enough space to go inside. And I finally, I'm still feeling kind of anxious. I go inside. Ramsey, he's like, do you want to talk about it? And I'm like, yeah. So we go outside to talk about it, and I'm trying to relate it as much as possible, but we often talk very different languages, as I feel that women and men just do at times. And I'm trying to tell him how I feel, and I'm like, so I first start explaining, like, the body dysmorphia, and I'm like, well, I just feel like I'm, like, gaining a lot of weight, and he says to me, he goes, well, that's my fault. I keep feeding you lots of burgers and fast food. And my face goes, it comes over. He goes, I go, you need to leave. He goes, I need to leave. I go, you need to leave. And he's like, I don't understand what you're hearing. I'm trying to encourage you. And I go, no, that's not what you're doing. That's not what you said. And he's like, I'm trying to, and his protectors are trying to take the blame because he is often playing the role of someone who's trying to take it from someone else. So he's trying to take the blame. I go, no, when I'm saying that, what I'm needing you to say is, no, you're not. Yeah, it's because of me and all the food I'm feeding you. Talk about even more triggered. So I am triggered at this point. I'm just like, I am hurt. And I keep making jokes like, I'm going to go to the gym now because, I got to work out. And he's like, where are you going? I'm like, the treadmill. And he starts shutting down because I'm like completely like cutting him off. And so he like starts kind of panicking with him in himself, which is his own manager trying to wait, I lost control of the situation. Let me try to get this back. So he can't even work out. He's like, I can't work out with you like this. I can't work out with you upset with me. And I was like, I'm not upset with you. I have to get away from you. So I'm like running in place when I'm talking to him, trying to work out right then. And so he goes outside and goes to sleep because he couldn't work out because he was in such a state of being triggered. I'm in such a state of being triggered. I'm out working. Oh, hello, cutie. She's so sweet. So I go into the gym and I'm trying to work out through this state of being. And ultimately, I came to the awareness, okay, these are all my parts being triggered at once, right? These are my fighters coming into play because I was vulnerable and open and I didn't like that about myself. And so I'm going to overcompensate with X, Y, and Z. She's just so cute, isn't she? So that's a little bit of what we were talking about earlier. And so that's just that was 2 hours. Look how many managers and protectors came up in 2 hours. And so when I started reading No Bad Parts, it really helped me to not feel like I was a crazy person because I was on such a continual cycle of managers, protectors, firefighters, managers, protectors, a little tiny exile. No, get that down there and beating it down. Let me go back into the cycle. And so often our inner dialogue is consistent with just our protectors and managers trying to keep us okay. And it's not to condemn them. Even what I was talking about this morning is always addressing them in a place of love. Even your inner critic, and I talked about that last Saturday too. It's not about saying, oh, hey, you're wrong, don't talk to her this way, like coming at her. It's like, hey, this is a place of love. We love each other here. Everything within me is in love. I want my inner world to be such a paradise that when I close my eyes, all I can feel is love and joy and happiness, and that's all that you can find within me because I've taken the time to love each part of me. And that self, that Christ self, excuse me. I'm going to drink that water after you. Is that okay? That self with a capital S is the Christ within you. It is your Christ self. Teaching the other parts of you how to re-love yourself. And as you were talking about the story, how do you say it? The demoniac? Demoniac. During worship, I even saw the parable of the prodigal son. And I was like, how does that, that was one of my favorite messages that my dad preached. Because I loved when he would preach it, he would get down here like this and say, well, the father's waiting on his son. Is it going to be today or is it going to be today? And that feeling would so resonate with me, and I loved that message. And even as I took this into my parts, I recognized that it's the self, it's the Christ self waiting for those other parts to come back home. And it's you that's there waiting for you, saying, is it going to be today? Do you want my love today? I have all this love to give. Do you want it today? But it's allowing those parts to even recognize that they need the love to begin with. Because your parts find a role that they fit in, and then they play out of that role, and they feel like, well, this is me. This is who I am. Until, Luke 11, when he finally comes back to his senses and goes, well, it has to be better than this. Your parts start to go, well, it has to be maybe better than this. And that self-love, that self-Christ is over here. It's already waiting for you. I'm ready to love you. Are you going to come home today? And when those parts come back almost like in shame and guilt and wanting to hide things, and that Christ self is standing there right there just ready to love with open arms, ready to celebrate that part coming home. Even that inner critic. Let me put a robe on you. Let me put my best rings on you. Let me parade you around because this is your home. This is where you belong. I've been waiting to give you love.
The older brother's the manager.
And the older brother's the manager. Yeah, absolutely.
God was showing me that earlier today, and it's the coins and the lost sheep. Now remember, what we've done is we put God outside of ourselves, the devil outside of ourselves, the parables outside of ourselves, creation outside of ourselves, when it's all within us. So we are treasure hunting, and we are hunting for the kingdom. We're going to experience Christ in all things. So even that part of you that you've experience shame and you keep looking away, Father didn't look away. That was not true that he couldn't look upon sin. Somebody made that up. And so the Christ in you is going to turn and look and gather back your coin.
If he couldn't do that, then he wasn't following the will of Father.
Right. He couldn't. Because there's no, so when we're saying no separation, what Jarod and Alex are describing is the Christ you redeeming all of your earth and bringing you into full alignment. And then just for the sake of, to bring this light is when you talk about your parts, don't call them your lady parts or your man parts, because that would be really weird.
I wasn't planning on doing that. No bad parts. This front row is going to be like objected to the back. But even as we talk about this, you guys, and tell you these parables that were always outside of you, that were always you, begin with you, start with you, we always bring it back to a place of love, because that's where healing is. It's not in judgment. And that prodigal son story resonated so much because he loved him and because he was waiting for him and he was excited to see him. And I resonated with the prodigal son who was in the guilt and shame and the parts of me that I didn't want to look at. And so when my dad would preach that message, it meant so much to me, because it almost felt like, well, if he could believe that, and maybe, my dad could see that in me. But even further than that, I was really just wanting that from myself. I was really wanting myself to not have to look away from the parts that were shame and guilt. And I talked about this earlier as well, as talking about how in religion, they punish the managers and the firefighters. They're constantly punishing the parts of you that you're trying, or the exiles trying to punish those parts of you. So then you're constantly just in a state of trying to do better. And we can't really reveal who we really are and who we were meant to be until we release those parts. And this is one thing I always say is, you can relax here. And then I ask them, hey, what would you want to do instead of this? Because the parts don't just leave. We're not trying to get rid of them. We're not bypassing them. They're parts of you. They've taken on a role that wasn't ever meant for them.
Hey, Alex, I was going to say, I noticed a time where I had a part that was pretending to be a self.
Oh, multiple times.
Okay, I'm healed.
Right. Say that again.
To make a complex model even more complex, here we go. I noticed that I had a part pretending to be a self, to be the self-led, in that it just wanted to get those parts healed so I don't have to ever just get those back there. I don't have to mess with those. And that is an agenda, and that's a part pretending to be a self. It's a self-like part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, the actors within yourself, the hypocrite within yourself. And the inner critic is pretty easy to identify because it's the mean voice. The voice that was hard for me to identify was the voice that's always trying to make sure I don't get it wrong. So when I'm in meditation, it's the voice that okay, we'll focus on this. Well, maybe you should do this. And it sounds really nice, but it's super manipulative because it's constantly trying to control the self and tell the self what to do to not get it wrong. But then when I talk to her, she's like, well, I just don't want you to mess up. I just don't want you to look embarrassed. And that sounds really kind, but you're not trusting the leadership of the Christ self that's within me that can be in control and it be okay. Even as Jarod was guiding through the meditation, I kept seeing that self, and I had to identify it, that it's not my true self, because it kept going, well, how about this? Or how about, constantly trying to get it right. I was trying to get the meditation and the visual right so that I could have the experience. But literally that part was stealing the experiencing from me because I was trying to get it right so much that I couldn't experience the meditation that we were doing with Jarod. And it sounds like such a sweet voice, but it's not. It's manipulative. And so as I talk to these voices and tell them to relax, and I'm like, what role could you play? Most of them, this was interesting because I saw this during worship, your abundance, your creativity, your financial freedom can be caught up in these parts that are too busy protecting you to allow anything to flow in your life. So they're so busy playing protector of those times that are frozen in time, of those trauma wounds as a child, that it's not allowing creativity to flow through you, and new ideas and business ideas and financial opportunities and relationships to flow through you, because it's constantly trying to protect you. And you can't allow a flow when all you're doing is protecting. Because if you're blocking one thing, you're blocking all things. And so even if you guys haven't listened to Omar and Yami, their financial sessions, amazing. They were incredible. And Yami, if you want to come up here, I'd love for you to come up here. It really I started listening to her before I started meeting with Jarod. And so it set me on this path of dealing with fear. What I would think was a financial fear in my life would end up being a protector in multiple areas of my life. Whether it was money or relationships, there would be these fear blocks of lack, or especially in religion, because that was condemned almost, wealth and financial freedom. That was almost looked at as a negative thing. And I would hear my parents, one of the memories that would come up is I would always hear them tell me how expensive I was, or how I was the most expensive child, or, well, Alex, if something was nice in the house, I would probably take it for myself. And my mom would be like, "Where's my nice lipstick?" And I was like, "Oh, I have it," because I loved those things. And so I would I felt like, I should have them. I didn't really look at it as stealing. I was stealing, but I didn't look at it like that. So I started to recognize these lies that were in my life about self-worth that were also related to my relationships, and then also related to my abundance mindset, and then also related to finances. And I realized that they were all protectors trying to keep Alex okay, but it was really what was stopping the flow in my life and creating the lack to begin with. And so as we turn to these managers in our lives with love and say, what other role can you play? You're going to see new business ideas start to come up. You're going to see financial freedom. You're going to see creativity beyond what you've ever experienced, because you're allowing yourself to truly embody who you were always meant to be, and embody the self, the Christ self, that is a never-ending flow of creativity, a never-ending flow of abundance.
So I want to say thank you to Jarod and you, because I had an experience last night, and you guys put all the words to my experience last night. So I was with Omar, we're just having our time alone, and he's giving me a massage. And as he's giving me a massage, and I'm going to be very vulnerable right now, so bear with me. All I kept thinking was, oh my God, there he goes. He's touching my fat, and what is he thinking? And I'm just like playing all this in my head. And then it hit me, I'm missing the moment thinking this. And I start crying. And when I start crying, he sees me, and I said, I'm just so tired of living like this, because those are my managers. Those are the ones that are like, well, you should be losing weight. You're not enough because that's what you should be doing. You have control of everything else in your life. Why not your weight? Why not the way you look? And so I start crying, but of course, when I start crying, what do I want to do? Stop crying, because now I'm being vulnerable in front of my husband, and that's not okay. I tell myself being vulnerable is not okay. And so he stops and he comforts me. And as he's comforting me, he's telling me, you're safe, you're good. And that's a big thing for me, because safety has always been a thing. I was telling Alex, I don't remember being ever a child, because of all the traumas as a kid. I had to grow up quick. And so him holding me and rocking me was very uncomfortable. Yeah. And this is a man that adores me, but even that makes me uncomfortable. And so then we stop and we're talking, but he's staring at me. And I said he was staring into my soul, and I broke down like I've never broken down before. And the first thought that came to my head was, I hate my parents for this. And I wanted to condemn myself for saying that, And all of a sudden I heard, it's okay because it's a release. It's okay to say that. You really don't, but you need to release those words. And so I did. And so I cried, of course. I cried like I haven't cried. I can't even remember the last time I cried like this. And now I'm just bawling, and he's just rocking me. And then, of course, after a little bit, I was like, okay, I have to be done. And we stopped. I was exhausted, and we went to bed. I woke up this morning, and I did a meditation, a Joe Dispenza meditation, and the last part was put your hand on your heart. And as I do this, all of a sudden it hits me that I don't love my body. And all I've ever done is tell my body how disgusting it is, how ugly it is, how awful it is. I love you. And then I get this compassion for my body and this love, and I start apologizing to my body. Because I realized that even what I was doing, I separated myself from this. I completely separated myself from my own body. And so I'm just like, I'm so sorry. And I'm caressing myself saying, I am so sorry for what I've done to you. And it was like a release. And then I'm like, why am I going through this? You know, this is very different for me. And then I walk in here and you guys explain all this. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I was already getting myself ready for today. But really, the biggest thing out of all this is that it's okay to be real. It was okay. It's okay for me to stand here and tell you, because even though we taught a finance course and I hear like, oh my God, that was so great, that was life-changing, there's still parts, like you said, there's still parts that have a great control of me. And it's that. It's that. And it's, even later on, I text my mom, and I was like, I love you, Mom, you know, even though as I was saying earlier how much I hated her, you know, or how much I hated my dad for what they've done. But it's because it's a release. Don't condemn yourself as you're releasing, because that is part of it. Part of that is that realness that, you know, because I'm like you. If I'm laying in bed, I start thinking, oh my God, I should be doing this. Oh my God, Omar's working so hard. Oh my God, why am I watching TV? I really should be running 3 miles, which I don't. I really, you know, and I'm constantly saying these things, and he's always like, I don't care. Lay in bed all day if you feel like it. Like, it doesn't matter to me. But I will say, you know how Ramsey said, oh, it's my fault because I'm feeding you? So he said to me last night, babe, I love you whether you're skinny or fat. And then this morning, he's like, oh, I know I stepped in it after I said that. But I just wanted to share that because I know that body dysmorphia is a huge thing for a lot of people. And what I realized, even when she said, where do you hold yourself? I realized here. And I struggle with acid reflux and, you know, all this stomach issues. And it's because all my trauma I've always held here. And it's very protective for me. So I just wanted to share that. Yeah. So it's not always, you know. We love you.
What I said earlier is often I read this somewhere and it resonated with me, and then I shared it, that oftentimes when we go to sleep, where we hold ourselves to comfort ourselves, when we go to sleep is often a place of where we have stored trauma. And so I was telling Yami how I will hold, I saw that, that's funny. Jesse, no trauma. So I was telling Yami how I hold like my womb area every time I kind of put my hand right here, because I've stored a lot of trauma in this area of my life. And even as she was talking about body dysmorphia and hating on your body, which is a very easy target for our inner critic, because it's right there and it's super easy. Are you trying to give me a Cheez-It? No? Looking in the mirror and always seeing what's wrong with you and always seeing what you need to fix first is that voice of the inner critic. And often for me, what that looked like was putting my body through things that was abusive. Whether it was someone else being abusive, whether it was someone else physically hurting me, or even to myself, trying to like push myself so hard in the gym where Like my body is breaking down because it's too much. That's also a manager. It's an easy part for us to control, so we would focus on that. But that's something that needs love. That's something that needs to be comforted. Anyway, so that was basically what we talked about today. It was a really good day. It was a really good day. I think there was some triggering parts, but ultimately it was just such a great day. And there was a healing release, and even what I spoke on during worship, we're not in this room to just get healed for the heck of it. We're releasing something in our atmosphere. We're releasing a vibration. We're releasing a sound. Whether you can hear it with your ears or whether you can feel it, it doesn't matter, because it's being released on the earth. And we're not just getting healed just for ourselves, even though that's an amazing aspect, and loving yourself is amazing, but we're releasing. We're the sons and daughters of God, and we're releasing a new vibration, a new way of living, a new way of existing. I know very few people that I've ever encountered that have fully embodied themselves and truly loved themselves, like less than I could count on one hand. And that's why we're talking about this today, not just to heal those childhood wounds or go back to bad memories, but to release them so that what we're vibrating at is only a frequency of love, that when things are falling apart around us, there's no fear to resonate within us. There's no judgment to resonate within us. When you're confronted with someone that you would consider judging before, but that's not even in you anymore, all you can give to them is love. That's what we're vibrating at. That's what we're releasing. That's why we're healing ourselves. That's why this is important. It's because what you hold is not just for you, but it's for everybody around you. It's for your children. It's for the people before you. It's for the people after you. The earth is literally crying out for something new, for a new earth. Yeah, that's right. And we're releasing that vibration here in this room by allowing love to flow and to heal these areas so that we can fully embody Christ within us. Look at her. She is so happy.
That's good. Okay, I got this. So I just want to say this about Alex, and I've been so impressed with her, just listening to her, following her online, listening, and then sharing today with her. She knows more about healing than most clinicians that I work with, therapists I work with. Like, she has a real understanding of this. And I just want to validate that, Alex. That is incredible. What a gift of healing, and what a gift of being able to present like you do, to share that with people. And it's been fun today. Thank you for helping me. All right, so that concludes our Saturday. If you would stand. We knew it was going to be a little heavy. Once you start going down this path, we're talking about real stuff with real people, and we were conceptualizing things in such a way it was going to take a little bit of thinking with us to follow us. But I think you guys got it. I really think you guys got it. You understand it. So may the self be with you, as Richard Swartz would say.
All right, real quick. I just have one song and another. Just kidding. Just so Jarod meant everything he said about the offering, but I know when he said shame on you, he just was meaning that tongue in cheek. Like, he's not going to try to put shame on you, because it'd be more work for him to get it off of you. All right, so understand that if that was your trigger. Guys, we've been on Saturday nights, whoever wants to go eat or whatever, we try to find a place. Well, we're going to go to whoever wants to, the Salty Dog.
Lazy Dog.
Oh, Lazy Dog.
Salty Dog. I'm going to say here, Jesus. How about that?
I'm sure, and that's at the end of, it's on 290 and Highway 6, and they're kind of holding some spots outside for us if whoever wants to go hang out and eat there or whatever. Hooters. And they'll divide up, or Hooters, he said. I don't know about that.
Otherwise known as Lady Parts.
That's going to be what you guys walk away with. I need to go talk to my Lady Parts and redeem them. Okay, so anyway, not the Salty Dog, the Party Dog. What is it called? Lazy Dog. I get mad to go in there because I don't have Russell with me, but whatever, it's whatever, we can go. So it's at the end of here. They're holding seats for whoever wants to go, and they'll divide up our tickets. So grab trash on the way out. If you're going to the Lazy Dog, hold your conversations for there, and let's go, yo. Hey, 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 hey.